Information about the world of running, inspiration to fuel passion and excellence, and ideas for making connections and finding community. You're listening to A to Z Running. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach, and this week we discuss our favorite topic, running by effort. We break down why runners approach training in this way and how it looks in specific workout types and examples. Yes, with examples.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, we explain every workout type. You really don't want to miss it.
Yeah.
Stick around after that for the latest from the world of running, including a new half marathon record, fast running at sound running. And
Track meet. It's called track meet.
Right, sound running. But it sounded funnier when I said fast running at sound running. And some unfortunate news, by the way, from the Diamond League circuit. So plenty of that to come. But before you do anything else, make sure, if you haven't already, go to AtoZrunning.com and look for the word follow. Because then you get everything, just in case you might be missing something.
We're going to refer to an article that we wrote that many of you probably don't know about because you weren't subscribed.
Recently published article, in fact.
Published. Yeah, and speaking of followers, one of our longtime listeners and followers, Benjamin, tweeted a recommendation of our podcast. So thank you. That was on Twitter.
Oh, excellent.
And he wrote, "What all runners need to know about their pelvic floor is a fantastic resource for all levels of runners."
Especially the pelvic floor levels.
That is a level of your body. And we all have one. If you missed that episode, it's very enlightening for many because not a lot of us know a lot about the pelvic floor, and it's essential for core function. So go back, listen to that episode. It's a good one.
And just in case you're curious whether we've talked about the topic of training by effort, which will be our main topic in a moment, the answer, of course, is yes. But the last time we did this at length was over 2 years ago, and many of you weren't listening at that time. As well, we've updated with some more thorough explanations of some things that, having worked with many runners in the last 2 years, we can certainly find better ways to explain things all the time.
Absolutely. And even if you're a seasoned runner, we actually get lots and lots of questions on this topic, so you definitely want to stay tuned in.
That is that, and this is this. We are ready to begin.
Let's go.
All right, well, on to our favorite topic, running by effort. So the key here, and the reason we're talking about this right now, is because as a training approach, we argue that this is the best.
Often argue this.
No, and I say we're not the only
No.
ones.
No, it's a
wait,
philosophy.
do you mean that we argue with each other or we
No.
argue with other people?
Not as much in recent days as we both embrace this way of training.
Recent days.
As we talk to a lot of athletes about training by effort, and the reason why it's so difficult is that you need to develop into an intuitive runner, and we want to help you do that. That's one of our goals at A to Z Running, because you're probably sick of me saying it. This is what really helps you thrive as a runner and helps you get the most out of your training. So that's why we wanted to uncover this topic a little bit more, because even for the seasoned runner, this is difficult for many of you to do. You really like measurements and running by paces and having it perfectly laid out for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to help guide you right now. We're going to help guide you right now on what efforts go in what places in your training.
So if you just spent $1,000 on a new watch with all these cool bells and whistles,
it's still fun to have that
I'm about
info
to tell
afterwards.
You to throw it away.
No.
Okay. No, but every conversation about training has to begin the same way. And we do this every time we talk with any of our runners, and certainly anytime we do this on the show. But it begins by thinking about what is my goal? Why am I doing this thing? Purpose is probably a better word than goal, because it's broader, but both apply. And so the reason why we have to do this is because you can't ever approach training without a clear sense of what it means for me when I try to describe success in the experience. And we're going to argue that however you answer that question, we're going to give you the path to success right now. But
it's a big claim.
let me briefly explain, I guess, why in that sense. So thinking about goals, most runners will say things like, I'm trying to qualify for something. I'm trying to run a certain time, like Boston qualify, or to get into this majors race, or other things like that, right?
Or to enjoy the experience.
Yes, well, I'm getting to that.
Oh,
it's
okay.
on the list. So that's one of, you're trying to run a kind of performance, right? That's a category, performance category. Or personal best, so I'm not trying to hit someone else's standard. I'm trying to beat my own. Still a performance goal. Okay, so how about just self-betterment in general? Like, I want to be fitter. I want to be healthy. I want to feel confident in my efforts. And so all of these things are goals that many of us have. And then, of course, there's always I just like it, and I want to enjoy it.
I want to be consistent at
have
it.
Fun. Well, yeah, I just want to do it and have fun doing it. Okay, so those are the categories, right? The performance category, the pleasure category, and the lifestyle category, among other nuances. Okay, now, here's the point. Many runners feel that depending on what the kind of goal or the category, that they have to train differently. So like if my goal is performance, I need to train a certain way. Like I got to be all in. I got to train hard every day. We've talked to actually some runners recently who said that exact thing. Like when I was really serious about this, I was really training hard. And I keep thinking to myself, did you enjoy it? Because the way you're describing it is like it was brutal, and you felt good about like the performance, but not as much about the training style. But anyway, that's some instances. That's not everyone's experience. So this is the point. The common logic might be that we train differently depending on the kinds of goals we have. But our argument is, in fact, no, you don't. As far as your training approach, it's the same regardless of your type of goal, regardless of your level and capacity. If you are a brand new runner trying to run a 5K for the first time, never having run in your life, or if you are a seasoned marathoner going for your 10th Boston or trying to run an Olympic trials qualifying time or beyond, the approach really is the same regardless. And we're going to make the case as to why here in a moment. But consider this. Nearly every runner who takes the all-in approach, that idea of like, I've got to go hard, I've got to go after it, almost always feels like it is ultimately unsustainable and often burns out. Okay? So there's that one aside with it. But why we tend to feel that way is because the all-in approach, if you look at some of the work like Brad Stulberg and Steve Magnus's publication on the Passion Paradox, it is in fact unsustainable and does result in burnout at some point, in almost every case. Not, of course, not every single person. So my point in saying that right now is because we are going to argue how a training approach can yield the best possible performance for any given person without having to sacrifice our enjoyment of the thing and or result in unsustainable approaches or burnout and such. Okay.
That doesn't mean that we recommend that people don't train very much.
Not at all what we're trying to say.
Right.
But we're trying to say here's what we're trying to say. We want to know ourselves and our efforts thoroughly and accurately so that we can consistently give exactly the degree of effort we ought in every instance so as to achieve the best possible outcome.
And guess what? It's going to be different depending on the variables in the day. So that's why we want to develop intuitive runners. And when we go based on effort and we really harness what that is, we can get the most out of our training regardless of what's going on in our lives. So we can be thriving runners.
Okay, we're going to talk about how to do this, and then we're going to give examples of different workout types and the things that are very familiar to you all. First, the foundation. We got to review the principle of training effort itself and what that is implying. We're talking about running by feel, not objective measures. And so training by effort is when I'm thinking about how hard I need to go and giving that much effort, and it's not got anything to do with what the watch says, including heart rate. Arguably, heart rate can be a valuable asset in a training by effort approach.
Yes.
But it is still an outcome. Remember that the heart rate is the result of how much effort you are giving. We are trying to condition runners to monitor the amount of effort they are giving, not by any kinds of results, but by how much they are intending to give. Okay, so it's the input that matters. That's the hardest part to grasp as we try to instill this in other runners, but also as we try to do it ourselves. That's the hardest part to grasp. It is the intentional effort that I'm giving, the deliberation, not the things that tell me whether I like my pace and all that kind of stuff. So inputs versus outputs, right? So the strategy then becomes I prescribe workouts based on efforts. So like it's an easy run, it's a steady run, so it's an effort type is the workout I'm assigning. And based off of then the effort intended to be given for the run. And it should be noted that the outcomes are mostly ignored in most instances as well. And we'll not really spend a lot of time on that right now, but it's an interesting nuance.
But going back to what Zach was saying, like you might use a heart rate monitor that helps a lot of people slow down and learn that they are not properly gauging their easy efforts in particular. And so that allows for athletes to say, hey, I've been telling myself this is easy, but this really isn't actually easy for my body. So there are values, like Zach was saying, to running with heart rate, especially as you're in the learning phase of what efforts are appropriate for you.
Yes, indeed. And it is one of the things that we can use as a tool to condition ourselves to know whether we're giving an amount of effort we're intending to give. So I like using heart rate monitors to help learn how to be more intuitive about it. But eventually the goal is to just not need any of that stuff. Not to suggest that we just throw it all away, like I said earlier.
Come back to it sometimes.
If you did feel inclined to throw it all away, I wouldn't hold it against you. But keep in mind then also how can I scale effort appropriately? And this is the trickiness with heart rate monitors, because a heart rate monitor is based on maximum effort, but not based on maximum effort for a given distance, just total period. So you have to then do things like, so 85% of heart rate reserve is the way we tend to use this metric, is usually a certain kind of effort, right? But it depends on the distance. And so then you get a lot of these training plans out there that will say, do 85% of heart rate effort for tempo runs. But what if your tempo run is 8 miles? What if it's 15 miles? Should you still be running 85% of heart rate reserve for 15 miles? So there's some trickiness around training plans that use heart rate. And many of them, the ones that are really trying to get the precision, are going to adjust those things. They know to do so. And unless you're just buying a sheet of paper offline and it's telling you what to do in training, if someone is designing that, they're trying to form it to what you need. But that's one of those pitfalls to avoid. Okay, so also, Andy, you made a kind of comment about post run and how you can help yourself.
Yes. So evaluating what was the effort that I gave, sometimes that can be tricky within a run, especially as you are learning and becoming an intuitive runner. So after you run, how do you feel? Like, you're going to probably know. Let's say you're vomiting at the end of an interval workout. Well, if your goal was to stay in threshold, then you did not give the proper effort because you went anaerobic. So I think it's good for runners to evaluate after a workout as well. And then also how you feel the next day. Okay, let's say that I had 90 minutes easy and the next day I don't feel good. Well, I probably didn't run easy enough for those 90 minutes.
Yeah, and this is one of those things that we have to do constantly in order to understand external factors, contributions. So like, if I'm not getting good enough sleep for a few days in a row, that's going to have an impact on that. And so like suddenly I'm thinking, man, I was not feeling well, but I look at the runs and like my paces were significantly slower than last week when I was running that same kind of effort. And yet like I'm feeling worse afterward. How is that possible? Am I losing fitness over the course of the week? Well, not likely. There's something else contributing. And so as a consequence, we recommend, although we don't necessarily do so with an iron fist, but we recommend that all runners keep some kind of training log where they're documenting these kinds of things, especially early days when you're just trying to learn how to do this kind of training system, trying to figure out how all of the things play together in our lives and our running is very difficult without being able to review it, look back on it. You're not going to remember all of this kind of stuff. So to Andy's point, reflecting after the run, but do so somewhere where you can then see over time. And many talk about things like Strava for this. And so, most runners don't want to put all those kinds of details on their public facing Strava. So like if there's a private notes function, putting it there. Strava has this like, how did this feel drop down when you add new workouts or edit ones that are automatically saved. But that doesn't give you any detail. So it's great to use those kinds of things.
There's a section for private notes.
It's great to use those kinds of things as long as you're providing more explanation.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just how do you know exactly?
And let's be honest, we're going to find a lot of things out because let's say we are on a continual trajectory of feeling fatigued, more and more fatigued. Okay, then we need to go to the doctor and get some panels. So I think that there is value beyond learning effort to having that training log and to evaluate how an effort felt on a run and what it felt like the next day as a result of the effort the day before.
Yeah. And just then ultimately remembering that the point here is to give exactly the degree of effort needed to produce the desired result. And so that scales to the context, like how I'm feeling in a given day. Because if I am having issues in a particular day, I'm not trying to get a result by my run. I'm trying to give an effort. And so the result will prove to me whether things are more and less affected by some of that kind of stuff.
I spoke to an athlete. It wasn't too recently, but it was a little bit back.
10 years ago, 20 years ago.
And we were talking about how to shift a mentality from like, how fast can I get away with this easy run being versus how like just running as slow as we need to do.
How
for
easy
this.
can I go?
Exactly. Because I think a lot of us are like, what is the maximum? I want to go the maximum for this workout as fast as possible for this day. But the interesting thing is that, well, let's say you gave 70% of that effort and it's still within the range of getting the adaptations, well, then you're just going to recover faster and have a better week of training. So it's not always like how much or how fast can I do at this effort, but it's like, am I within the range that's going to allow for me to rebound and continue training effectively?
Yeah. What are the adaptations I need, and what's the kind of effort that's most effective and efficient in resulting in those adaptations? That's one of the contemplations. It's actually why the Hanson's training method has leaned towards shorter long runs versus longer long runs, because it is more efficient to gain your training adaptations if your long run does not produce a massive recovery time needed. However, we argue that there's another way to accomplish that too, but that's not the point at the moment. We'll get to that in our specific examples. Okay, so let's talk about for just a moment the implications, because if we have not yet convinced you that this is a great approach, consider this. So no more running by pace, ever. Workouts, racing, anything like that. That's one of the implications.
Everyone's like in their head, but,
nope,
but, and you're all your heads, right?
I'm literally saying ever.
If you are thinking that, let us know.
So I was running not terribly long ago, and I was doing like a tempo run for a long period of time. And
very long period of time.
Ran past someone, and someone was like, "Oh, what pace are you going?" And my honest answer was, I don't know. Because I didn't know, because I didn't care, and I never looked at my watch to know whether I was running one pace or not.
It was under 5:20 pace, though.
No, it was not. That was a different run.
Oh, it was a different run.
Okay, so the point is, like in those kinds of situations, we want to ask ourselves that, what kind of pace am I running? I don't care. Just that's your new mantra. I don't care.
No, that's
nope,
a terrible
yeah, that's a terrible mantra.
No.
I'm kidding, Andy. That was a joke.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so that is one of the implications, but consider the benefits. If you do this well, you will never blow up on a run again. Ever. Well, almost never. Because there are some things that can cause, like super hot days where, yes. Okay,
there's
so it's
lots
possible
of factors.
still. Yes, of course. But in terms of by my own poor choices in a run, I can avoid all of that by running by effort correctly. Appropriately. All right. So also we mentioned earlier, no more burnout. We're trying to teach runners how to train in such a way that we enjoy the training all the time, more or less. And that's a really good thing. That also means that we're going to flourish quite a bit better. Okay. And fundamentally, we want to feel good almost all the time, almost always. Be successful in every race and performance. And this is the key, because I can promise that. I can literally promise that. And you're going to say, no, you can't. But I can, because...
The measures.
Right.
What are the measures of success?
What does it mean to be successful? Answer me this. If you knew on every single race that you did as much as you physically could do on that day, you produced from your body the best possible physical result on that day, would you tell me that was not a success? Would you say that was a failure? How could you say that's a failure if you knew you got everything out of your body you could get? So that's the answer to the question then, and how I approach racing in such a way so as to get everything out of the body we can possibly get. And if we can do that consistently, which is very difficult, I certainly don't know anyone who does that every single time, but we can get there, or at least get closer to there. And then we know with certainty that we were successful because we got anything we could get out of the body. Now, the best implication of this is that when you go and you do a race and you know that you did everything you could do physically and you got everything out of your body, but it doesn't produce the result that you thought you could produce. Like, I felt like in my training and the things I was doing that I could run faster than that. Why didn't I? It opens up the door to this awesome inquiry about something went wrong somewhere, but I know it wasn't my racing decisions because I know I got out of my body what I could. So then we get to start to explore the other things that contribute and find and identify the sources. Mm-hmm. That's good. That's great.
So
now,
what does this look like in specific workouts? You're all wondering, like, okay, Zach, this sounds nice, but what does this look like in my regular training programs?
How about jogging, Andy?
Jogging,
what kind of effort is that?
Jogging, I love jogging. I used to not, but now I do. Jogging is recovery. You want to feel better at the end than you did when you started.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, you do. And in essence, jogging serves only one of two purposes. Either it's recuperative, like you're trying to recover on the run from something else, or especially early stages in training, it's to build leg strength. Yeah. Like, you need to have strong musculoskeletal system to be able to handle training loads. And jogging is a great way to do that without risk, low risk.
Low risk.
Love it. Okay, by the numbers. And by the way, I'm going to do this. I haven't done this in the past. I'm actually going to give you percentages.
Whoa.
There's a reason for this, because for some reason, some of us have a hard time with the nuanced descriptions. Like, all of us have a hard time with the nuanced descriptions. I even sometimes have a hard time describing things within their nuance. And so it helps to at least put them on a scale, knowing that the scale is kind of just relative. It just floats out there and means very little ultimately, but it helps provide a kind of sense of differentiation. Okay. Mm-hmm. So jogging is at most 50% of your maximum effort for any given duration. Okay. Oh, and I should say all of these percentages are relative to the duration. That's one of our general considerations that I accidentally skipped over, Andy. So we need to remember that effort is based on the duration, not some like fixed maximum pace or something like that. That doesn't make any sense. So if I go out for 10 miles, a jogging effort for 10 miles is a different pace than a jogging effort for 30 miles. Mm-hmm. You can imagine why. But the point is, jogging is anything under 50%. So there's also a massive range of effort that jogging can occupy, because I could be going literally at a dead shuffle and barely picking my feet up, call it a jog, or I can be going at a reasonable running cadence, but it's still very low effort. Okay. Now, bring it up the next notch to easy running, which we could call this like easy aerobic running, because we are in the aerobic zone at this point, where jogging isn't always. And as a consequence, easy aerobic running is like it's the baseline for all of our, like, what we would call normal mileage pace, right? And that
don't have a normal mileage pace. I'm going to put that out there.
Baseline.
I'm just going to say, I'm going to put this out there, because I find a lot of people fall into the trap of, this is my easy pace, therefore I am not going to run slower than
what
this.
A silly thing.
So
to
if
think.
you think, like, if you're like, no, I won't run with this training group that's running, 15 seconds per mile slower than me. Did I say seconds? I said seconds, right?
Something like that.
It should be fine for you to do so. It's okay. Even though that's not your normal easy training pace, running 15 seconds per mile slower is fine.
And don't hear any harshness or accusation in our words.
Yeah, please don't.
Or at least not in Andy's. I have plenty of harshness and accusation. But the point here is not that we're not trying to cast shade on the way anyone's doing
I'm
things.
Sorry, yeah. Did I sound like that?
No, you didn't. I do though, and so I'm hedging. But we are trying to clarify that there's so many common thoughts we have as runners about things that make no sense in terms of the thing we're trying to accomplish. And that's a good example of that. There is no such thing as my easy running pace. That is a silly concept.
And if you do have one, that's fine. It's probably a range of a minute.
What
like
it
an
should,
entire
yes,
minute.
Right. And what it should be is my easy running pace is what happens when I'm running easy today.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah, today.
For that run.
It's going to fluctuate.
And who knows what it's going to be, and who cares, as long as it's the right amount of effort. So how do we get the right amount of effort for easy running? Because we've described we've described very little about the actual effort. And so what it is you have to finish the run feeling like I could continue doing that for a long time, that I could go farther, I could go faster, all of those kinds of things. And you also need to consider with easy running, I'm in the aerobic zone, but I never feel like I'm pushing. I never feel like I'm pressing. Because when I'm doing that, that means that my system is starting to elevate, and we don't want to elevate it beyond just very comfortable aerobic running. Mm-hmm. So in terms of our percentage scale we mentioned earlier, easy running is the big window. It's like somewhere in 50 to 70%. So you have quite a bit of a range there. As a consequence, we also have to be thinking about the fact that sometimes our easy running needs to be on the lower end, and sometimes it can be on the higher end, depending on how we're feeling. So on a given day, if I've done substantial work in some capacity, like a harder workout the day before or something like that, it's better to stay on the lower end of the easy running. But in general, it's somewhere in that window. Mm-hmm. Okay, now let's move into the strong effort stuff. We could call these hard efforts. Before the specifics, a couple general considerations when we start running sustained strong efforts. We're not talking about intervals yet, but there's a lot of different stuff. Like we sometimes even use different words to describe the same thing. We also sometimes use the same words to describe different things. And this gets really confusing. So you'll hear people use things like tempo, steady, which are some of the ones we use. Threshold, we don't ever assign threshold workouts to anyone for various reasons. But anyway, so a lot of people use that. But then there's actually like different kinds of threshold. There's like aerobic threshold, anaerobic threshold, lactate threshold, which some of those are the same. But the point is, it's confusing. So we need to know when we're looking at training terms what exactly the effort is we're intending to give, not just what the word relative to other things we've done. Okay, so that's good. We're talking about one of the more challenging types of runs in terms of effort, sustained strong efforts, because you always feel better in the beginning than the end. And as a consequence, it almost seems like it's a progressive effort, which almost all running is a kind of progressive effort.
I had to convince Zach of this.
Yeah.
By the way.
Well, yes.
I'm like, if you're running the
sense,
same effort, you're going to gradually slow down during a long distance race.
Not necessarily, but
you want to be able to increase your effort in the late stages of a race.
The point is not that you're changing effort. That's not the point. And this is why Andy and I argue about this all the time. Your effort doesn't change. How you feel as a result of the effort changes.
Oh, I see.
See, inputs and outputs. We got to get back to inputs and outputs.
My effort does increase at late stages of the race.
Well, in racing, that's a different thing because
it
should.
Okay, yes. We'll get back to the subject
we'll get back to
hand,
that.
which
now,
is steady efforts.
Sustained, not yet steady, but any kind of sustained strong efforts. You will feel a progression in terms of I don't feel as good at the end as I did at the beginning at any given effort. But the point is we still need to understand that if I'm giving an effort right now, is this an effort I can feel comfortable doing throughout the entire time? Knowing that it will get harder, but it's still the same effort. Okay, so that's the key, and it's very, very challenging. Now, if you don't know, and this is the part where it's like you have to be super aware of the intuition has to be very high to do this well. Most runners will start too fast, some too slow, but very few of us truly have a balanced effort experience with these kinds of runs. So here's Lydiard's secret. This is his great idea. That is, in truth, a great idea. He would have his runners, and he would do this early stages in their training, and then he would do it once or twice throughout as a kind of checkpoint. He would have them do a 1 hour steady run where they would do an out and back on a course, and it's not a distance out and back, it's a time out and back. 30 minutes out, and then you come back, and the goal is you need to come back in as close to exactly 30 minutes as you can so that you're running exactly the same pace out as you did back. And then what you learn from that is you now know how you felt over the course of that 1 hour in the beginning versus the end stages. And you do that a few times throughout training so that you ingrain in yourself the intuition of, if I'm giving this much effort now, I know how it's going to feel later on when I'm giving that much effort. Okay, cool, right?
Yeah,
That's
cool.
practical. All right, steady efforts.
So what percentage, Zach?
Steady effort is the first step in strong effort running, and it is 75%-ish
Okay.
of your maximum for a given duration. Remember, it's always relative to duration. So if I'm running 10 miles, steady effort is 75% of my maximum effort for 10-mile race or something. Now, in concept, steady effort is just basically anything just beyond easy efforts. So now I feel like I'm working, but I'm very comfortable still. I am by no means overexerting myself at any moment in time, even by the end of the run. So if someone were to tell you to go out and run 20 miles steady, you still need to finish those 20 miles feeling like, that was pretty good. Like I could keep going. I could go faster, all that kind of stuff. Steady effort is never straining by any means. Well, really, none of these are efforts.
So if we're going to talk about like breathing, conversational, whatever, you would be able to get out a few sentences here and there, but you probably wouldn't be like super chatty.
Yeah, remember, this is fully aerobic. You have to be able to breathe comfortably the entire time because it's fully aerobic.
But you're working hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hardish. We'll go with hardish.
So you're going to be able to talk, but you're probably not going to want to be like long-winded about everything.
Yeah. So steady efforts, you are comfortable. You're running strong. You're applying pressure now. You're pushing a bit, but you are comfortable. Then we get to the next step, and that is tempo effort. Okay. Now this is the part where like people use all sorts of different words here. Remember, we're talking about relative to distance. So the word threshold no longer applies. We're not even going to use it at all because all of these benchmarks are relative to a distance, not relative to a maximum capacity. Okay. So tempo is the one we're going to use. And tempo, you can use a different word here if you want to, but tempo is the word for 85% of your maximum effort for that duration. So a half marathon tempo would be 85% of your maximum potential in a half
Which
marathon.
would be very hard. It would still feel
It's
like
strong. Yeah, you're running strong.
Yeah.
You always have more to give in this kind of a run, but you are no longer comfortably strong the entire time, but rather uncomfortably strong.
Yeah.
And if you're going for a really long time, like let's think about like a 22-mile tempo, for instance. Some people do those.
Why are you giving these as examples? Most people don't do 22-mile
Because it's
tempos.
important to understand the difference. So in a 22-mile tempo, you're not going to feel uncomfortable at the beginning because you would be dead by the end, right? Well, not dead. But so that it's relative. But if I'm doing like a 6-mile tempo, it's uncomfortably strong the whole time. But I finish and I know I've got plenty left that I could have given if I wanted to. So steady is like comfortably strong. Tempo, I'm pushing into an uncomfortable range now, but it's still manageable. That is the key here. It is still manageable. Okay? Does that make sense, Andy?
It does make sense,
okay,
yeah.
Good. All right. I've never been quite sure about how to describe that one well. And then the next one, and this is the final benchmark before we get to like race effort, and that is time trial / almost race effort. Or
wait, we should back up with
Why?
the tempo because there is a recommendation for tempo efforts that we have. And usually that tempo, like doing the 85%, many people aren't going to get a lot of benefit for doing it longer than 20 minutes. So like a 20-minute tempo.
No. That's different. Okay, so yes, there's a maximum period of time where you like aren't really going to benefit more from a given effort at different stages in training, but it depends on your race goal. So if you're running like 5K, 10K type of stuff, your higher level effort things don't need to be very long. Should never actually be very long because it's inefficient training wise.
Even though you could go farther than the duration given to you in your plan, like let's say it's 20-minute tempo, you don't want to exceed that because at that point there are some losses to you see the gains and the losses, and there would be more loss of time recouping. Mm-hmm. So like if you can get the benefit from 20 minutes, don't go 30.
That is the truth.
Of the tempo.
That is the truth.
Usually
your run
your run will be longer than that,
yes.
but for the portion that's hard.
Yeah, and that's probably more, we should have another conversation at another time. We've certainly talked about in other instances of how to be effective and efficient in training, like both of them. So you maximize the workout with being able to recover fast enough to get more quality stuff. That's not exactly what we're trying to cover here as much as a broad principle, training by effort does accomplish that goal.
Yeah, okay.
But yes. So in terms of then the next tier, time trial / near race effort, or we could call it race effort, but I'm just not going 100%. This is the 90 to 95% effort range. So I'm approaching full effort for a given distance, but I'm holding something back still. And we'll use this kind of stuff. Any athlete will use this kind of stuff in training when I'm really trying to hone the edges. And so this is not something you do regularly. It's not something you do frequently, except for when you're preparing for races in late stages or something like that.
And it might actually be a race, like
and
a
it may
tune-up
indeed be a
race
race.
that
Yep.
you use to achieve the purposes of a time trial.
Yeah, this is in fact the effort that we tend to recommend for most in-season racing, not necessarily all the time, but rather than doing a full effort every time I run a race when it's not my target race, we would recommend a slightly scaled back version.
And if you want to know a secret, usually this is the effort you do until the end of your race anyway.
It is indeed.
So find out what you can do in the last few miles of the race. And so that would be the part that's different, like laying it all out. Yep. But if you're going to be doing a marathon and you want to do 95% until the last 10K of the race, that's a pretty good plan. So your race wouldn't look much different for many people in long distance racing until you get to the final closing stages.
Potentially, indeed. So in that sense, how do you feel when you're doing this kind of effort? It is challenging, but once again, you are not straining for it. You're finishing feeling, again, like I still could have done something more there, but I was definitely going hard. You are not comfortable for these kinds of things anymore. I mean, comfortable is relative. If you're doing this for 20 miles, you are comfortable for some of it, like I said, with the tempo. But a good example is if I'm doing like a 5K at this kind of effort, then I'm really running pretty close to my maximum possible 5K for my current fitness. And many will find themselves doing things like running PRs in these kinds of things when their training's going well, because you really are doing just about full effort, but just not quite. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the mindset. And like Andy said, it's best to do those kinds of efforts in a race scenario simply because it's more fun and you're already having to try to run pretty hard. It's not as fun to do that on your own.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, we wanted to just touch on threshold running briefly to make sure that it's clear why we don't include that in this scale. And the reason is because threshold is relative to maximum capacity, not to a given distance or duration. And so as a result, threshold running is always the same effort. Regardless of how far you do it, it's the same effort. It's relative to your either lactate maximum capacity, heart rate maximum capacity. It just kind of depends on which type you're doing. But the point being, it has a different barometer. And so you can do threshold training in a sense, but it's you apply it in a different mindset. You don't apply it with the same scale that we're using here.
That's when we talk about doing intervals where you are done once your legs feel heavy, because you do the same effort, but you actually might do less depending on how quickly your legs get heavy.
Yeah, well, that's a good bridge in the gap to the second aspect of training workouts, strong running, which is interval types of strong running. And for interval kinds of running, you really don't have that much variety here. You have a couple of different types, and then you just have lots of creativity in terms of how people structure them and what kinds of distances they use and what other things they put in with them. So the fartlek is the basic interval type. It's the
Our
core of all
athletes
intervals.
know that we love fartlek workouts.
Yeah, and in principle, a fartlek is not every kind of interval workout. You know, some people use it to describe like any type of interval workout. A fartlek is intentionally designed to be more variety and more interplay between different types of paces and distances and efforts. So as a consequence, we could spend a lot of time right now describing fartleks, but we're not going to because we already did that in a recent episode. And we've got a great article Andy mentioned earlier. So if you do want to read more on that, you can go
a lot
check
of
it out.
people have given us feedback that they found it very beneficial to read more about fartleks and this way of approaching them. So if you are looking to learn more, actually we have a lot of coaches that reach out to us learning stuff about our show, learning stuff about running from our show and implementing it into the training that they do with their athletes. So all ages, all levels of experience come to find value as they learn more about these approaches to fartlek and efforts.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, in thinking about at least how we're applying it here in this spectrum, fartleks are lots of different types of efforts in a given workout, and so it doesn't necessarily fit a single description. But the point of a fartlek is you're done when you feel like you're starting to tire in any given interval. And so you go faster when you want to go faster, and naturally you're going to be done sooner with the interval because you're going faster. And so how that plays out depends on lots of different factors, and go read that article if you want more.
Yeah. I have heard people say, like, when they first start doing fartlek, it's really hard to vary their efforts and their speeds, and because it will just kind of like default to like their steady state if they've been doing a lot of those or whatever type of workout they've been doing a lot of. Well, that's the point. The point is to stretch you and grow you. So if you have done a fartlek before and you're like, I didn't like that, try it again.
Indeed.
And again and again.
That is true. So thinking then about other types of intervals, more classic interval structures where you're doing like the same kind of thing on repeat or something of that nature, then the spirit of the workout is a little different than the fartlek. If that's intended to be geared toward variety, interval workouts are usually used to specifically tax a certain system heavily and achieve adaptations consequently. So most of the time it's anaerobic. It's not always. You can do intervals that are like aerobic intervals and such. They're not very efficient for the main goal. So we wouldn't ever recommend aerobic intervals unless for some reason you need to as an adaptation, which we're not going to get into that right now, but there's lots of different reasons we might say it's better to do an interval structure for an aerobic run for now. Think about like the walk jog concept.
Yeah.
That's an aerobic interval, right? So there are reasons why you do those kinds of things in other capacities. But in terms of like the classic interval workout, it's usually used to train your anaerobic system, your glycolytic system, so that you can teach your body how to deal with things like lactic fatigue as it starts to set in. Muscle recruitment factors are a piece of the puzzle. And then there's a number of other things. Sometimes it's just neuromuscular. A lot of marathon programs include some intervals in there. If you're doing a marathon and you're running interval workouts, do not do anaerobic intervals. That's crazy. You have no need for your anaerobic system. Well, not no need, but virtually no need for your anaerobic system. And it's super inefficient. If you are truly running anaerobically, which, by the way, most runners don't actually run anaerobically in interval workouts when they think they are, because you have to like seriously push pretty hard to do so. But either way, don't do it if you're training for a marathon. Anyway, that's all we need to say about that. Because we want to talk about long runs.
Yeah.
And for the sake of time, make sure we can spend at least a few minutes on this because this is one of the ones that people do the most. Like everyone's doing long runs.
Everyone does long runs because, wait for it, it's one of the most important runs of the week.
It is. If you didn't hear us recently talk about that, go back and listen to some of the other stuff we did. And in terms of the two different kinds of approaches to long runs, you have like just the easy effort stuff and you have some kind of strong effort. We do want to touch on both of those here because easy effort long runs, if we're talking about an easy run of any kind, being that description earlier, for a long run, naturally, that means it's probably going to be a little bit slower than a shorter easy run because it's relative to the distance, right? And you have to finish the long run feeling like you had more to give. Now, consider that a moment.
People are like, what?
So if your plan says to run 3 hours and you're like, I'm done with those 3 hours and I can't hardly walk, that was not okay. Like you need to be able to finish it. So two things happen there. Either one, you went too hard, or two, you went too long for your current musculoskeletal strength. So you need to be strong enough to handle whatever the distance is assigned, which many runners run too long before they're able to handle it well and adapt to it well. That's where the Hanson's method comes in. They are significantly against running too long when your system can't handle that. Now, as a consequence, you have two options. You build it up slowly and you run slow enough that you can handle the distance and the effort. So that's the easy long run. Mm-hmm. So you got to be able to do more when you're finished. Mm-hmm. Now, the strong effort long run
warning
way overused in training.
It can be used But think about it. We don't want to grow our duration and our intensity at the same time.
Definitely not
that means trouble most of the time, because that's when people are getting injured. Can you tell we're passionate about this?
Yeah. So in the past, we've been known to say things like you should just not do it. Don't do strong effort long runs. But then some people caught us in our lie because we
It's
actually
not a
have
lie.
well, we actually have our runners do them sometimes.
Yes, because
So-
we say in general, when people are growing, when they're growing for the first time, let's say that that's the first time that they've ever done an 18-mile run, we will never recommend that they do a fast finish.
Yeah. And I was also kind of joking when I said never, because we don't ever say never do strong long runs. But when you do and what it looks like is a really important consideration, because the first thing is, once again, it has to be relative to the distance. So if I'm running, for instance, steady or tempo effort for 20 miles, that is not as fast as a steady or tempo effort for 10 miles by the very nature of the thing that is relative to the distance. Okay. So a strong effort long run, whatever kind of strong effort. Yes, you could even do a time trial long run. So I want to run time trial 22-mile run.
With some of our
That
athletes.
means it's near maximum effort. That makes sense. Now, for this instance, what we're describing here is a strong effort needs to then fall in only certain periods of time in training, because you should never do this unless your aerobic system is very well conditioned. You've already conditioned it highly, because otherwise it's very inefficient. It's not good aerobic training to do strong effort long runs. It is helpful, but it's inefficient, because you can accomplish that better in other ways. So what it is then is it's a really important element. If your system can handle it, your musculoskeletal strength is high, your aerobic system is well developed, then it's good prep for long races. If you're going to be doing hard effort for the long race, it is valuable then to do strong effort long runs if you're ready to handle them. Your body can actually absorb the training.
At this point, you've probably already done a conditioning phase of training.
At this point, what do you mean?
Like if you
Like
go...
everyone's in the same phase right now?
No, what I'm saying is like if you're going to be doing a
Yes.
hard
Oh,
effort
thank you.
long
Yes.
run, you have already done a sufficient amount of conditioning.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah.
Now then, thinking about, so by the way, when you finish something like one of these efforts, it has to apply in the same way that it does regardless of the distance. So like a steady effort, I have to finish a steady long run still feeling like, comfortably strong. I get done with that run and it's like, I got plenty more I could do. So if you can't do that, if you can't run steady for 20 miles and finish feeling pretty good about it, you clearly shouldn't be running steady for a long run.
And a lot of your guys are going to be thinking, oh, well, I guess some of my long runs I thought were supposed to be easy long runs were actually steady long runs.
That's exactly it.
Because when I get done, I feel good, but I don't feel like I could go a long time after this.
One of the things that happens as you gain fitness, most runners do this by accident, myself included, almost every season. So what happens is we start to run our long runs and think, I'm feeling really good. And like the pace is starting to pick up and I'm getting into a nice groove and a rhythm. But then we get done with the run and it's like, I'm pretty tired. Like I definitely, I just realized I pushed a little bit there. That was too hard.
Yeah.
That was not an easy run anymore. Now, it's not too hard if you're supposed to do a run of
Right,
that
sure.
kind. But yes. Okay. Have we belabored the point? Yes, we
Yes.
have. Now let's talk about races.
Yeah.
This is our final piece here in the puzzle, and this is the one, if I can say it, is the hardest point on which to convince you. This is the one that most will say, I'm not doing that.
Can I give some evidence for convincing?
Maybe?
I have run my fastest marathon without a watch.
You also may have made some potentially risky choices in that race, and it paid out somehow.
Run my fastest 5K without a watch. I have run my fastest mile on a track without a watch.
Well, arguably, mile on a track doesn't need a watch anyway because you're just at a dead sprint the whole time.
I'm just saying.
So,
Those
yes,
are all
this is
different
true.
distances in which I did not look at a watch.
So you are the example that we should all follow.
I'm just saying that it is possible to still run your fastest times and perform the way you would like to without using the feedback of a watch and just using the feedback of your body.
Yes, allow me to say it in this way because Andy wouldn't. But the fastest marathon she's describing was one of those instances we mentioned earlier where she was trying to qualify for the Olympic trials specifically. And so her goal was to run a time. Now, answer me this. If her goal was to run a time, why didn't she run with a watch? Because there was a better way to accomplish that goal than try to look at a watch on splits.
The work had already been done. So it's not like I'm going to chase this pace and drive myself into the ground to go get it. It's like I did all this training and now it's time to see what the effort produces. Like how fit am I? Because that's the goal of a race, is just to see how fast we can run on that day, what our fitness will yield. And regardless of whether I'm looking at my watch or not, I'm going to try to find whatever that is. So I did run faster than the pace for the time, which was a humongous PR. It was over 10-minute PR for me, but I wasn't looking at the watch to do that. I was regarding my efforts during the race.
Yeah. So now, what do you do then? Okay, so we do, in fact, recommend running every race by effort alone. There is no reason to have a watch or use a watch.
People are I know, are like this is very rare, guys. We understand that most people do use a watch when they're racing, but we're just giving you another way of doing it that we have found great success, and we're going to tell you why.
So, okay, remember the goal. Let's go back to that for a moment. You want to perform well, right? You want to accomplish something. You want to feel good. You want to have fun. Some of those kinds of things, right? All of those are better accomplished without the watch, including the performance goal, to our previous point. Because if you knew you got everything out of your body that you could get out of your body, then it does not matter what the time says, because you couldn't have run any faster. Okay? So that's the first key takeaway here. If we can get there, which we can, we are insisting it's possible. Okay, so for those trying to get the most out of our bodies, then here's the thoughts. The watch is always going to be lying to us. That's the one thing we always say about the watch. It's always lying to you.
Yep.
Because it's never telling you the full truth of all the things that contribute to how you're feeling and what you're doing. It's only telling you the result of your effort in that given moment, which there's no way to know that that's in fact what it should be. So you say, I want to run 8-minute pace for this marathon. And so in the beginning, when I'm running 8-minute pace, it's like, oh, perfect. I'm doing exactly what I should be. But what if you're running too hard for those 8 minutes? What if you're running too easy?
Yeah.
And you should in fact be capable of much more, but now you've limited yourself because of that watch.
Yeah.
So both of those are possible.
Yeah. So let's think about this. Anytime you look at your watch, what is the feedback telling you? Because that's what you're looking for. You're looking for feedback, right? If you look down and it's too fast, you think, oh man, I got to slow down, which is usually kind of a negative thought. And then if you are running and you're running by effort, you look down, for a little bit, you look down and it's too slow. That feedback is also negative. Mm-hmm. So in both instances, or if you're looking down and you're right on the money, I guess sometimes that can make people feel confident. But what I'm saying is that there's a lot of the time that the feedback that you're going to get from your watch is not going to be helpful. Also, GPS. I'm going to put that out there too, because I have heard so many athletes say, I couldn't get GPS at Chicago Marathon. It was super wonky and it messed up my race. Well, GPS is wonky in a lot of major cities. I travel for my work, and when I use GPS down in the cities, it's terrible. So if you go to a major city and you're dependent on your watch and pacing, and that's what makes you feel comfortable, it's possible that will betray you in some of these big races that are in cities. So just putting that out there too.
Don't believe your lying watch that's the rule. Oh. Okay, now consider then as well, what if I'm just trying to like have a good time and I want to enjoy it? A lot of times runners will say things like this to us. Well, I don't want to like just go out and really push hard in this marathon. I just want to have a good time with it. So I'm going to run like a minute per mile slower than the last marathon I did. Like that. What a silly thing to do. Well, if you just want to have a good time, why does the number matter at all now? What a strange thought. Now, I don't, like when one of our athletes says something like that, I don't say, you're silly, don't do that. But what we do talk about is if I know how to give the right kind of effort, then I can give it in any capacity. So I can say, I want this to be a comfortable run today. I know how hard to run for it to be comfortable. If I want to say, I want to perform as well as I can. So you get the point. That's the end result that is possible. And that is, in fact, the best possible way to accomplish all of the goals. If it's a performance thing, if it's I'm just doing it for fun, if it's I want to enjoy it and feel good and be strong, all these kinds of things. Mm-hmm. All of them. Now, one final note, unintended benefits. Well, I guess it's not a final note because now I realize I said it earlier when I didn't intend to. But remember that if we can do this well, that it allows us to then identify what things we can do better in our training and our preparation and our lifestyle dynamics. So for instance, if I trained in a certain way and I thought to myself, that training didn't go super well, and then the race result is X, Y, or Z, I can say, here's areas I know I can improve in the training. to try to get a better result out of my body because I knew I got as much as I could out of it in that instance. Or maybe it's like I trained really well and the race result wasn't what I thought it should have been. Maybe there's some other things I need to look at, like what was my diet like around then? What was my sleep like around then? Was I well hydrated? Did I not do things nutritionally in the race that maybe could have helped? All this stuff. But if I knew I got what I could out of my body, I don't have to think that the answer is I had a bad race, because that's never the answer.
Or a workout. I see it all the time. I had a bad workout.
Had a bad
today.
workout.
Well, did
Why?
you get some good adaptations from it? Because
Well,
then
maybe.
it served its purpose. You know?
Also, if you never look at your watch, you
won't know.
probably won't ever say that again,
Yeah.
right? Like, I had a bad workout. Well, how do you know?
I guess if you feel like
yes,
crap, you
that's
know?
exactly it. I felt bad.
felt
Now,
crappy,
here's
yeah.
the key, right? I felt bad, which means you probably should have just run slower, right? Because assuming that if I'm not feeling good, my effort is going to produce a lower result, then I get done with it thinking, I didn't feel as good today, but I didn't smash my legs in the process because I wasn't feeling good and still trying to hit a pace. And that brings us full circle.
So one more comment before we are done with this topic just for today, because I know that it creeps up in our conversations quite a bit. But the idea of running by effort also allows for you to play. And what I'm saying is, when you're running in a workout like a steady effort and you're like, oh man, my effort's a little bit too pressed, you back off. Well, how can I run better and run faster without trying harder? Because
we've
it's about
we've got
effort.
content on that another time, Andy.
We do. But what I'm saying is this. When you're running, if the goal is to run as effortlessly as you can, and sometimes you don't want to be effortless.
Sometimes you want to actually give substantial
But if
effort.
I'm able to think about how can I accomplish this goal without pressing and chasing and striving and just, giving my full self, going all in when it's not the appropriate time. Instead, I'm thinking, how can I run better? It changes your mentality. It changes the way you run.
Indeed. And with that, there's so much more that can be said.
So much more.
But since we at least now convinced you to throw away your new $1,000 watch,
No.
let's go ahead and move on to the world of running.
This week in the world of running, we have a U.S. championship on the road, the U.S. Half Marathon Road Championship. And we're going to start it off with some big news, which is a new American half marathon record on the women's side with Emily Sisson running a time of 1:07:11.
Very fast.
Very fast. And it was a fairly new record by Sarah Hall this year in Houston, who joined her husband on that half marathon record board. But again, it's just such a fast day and age of women's running. Emily Sisson chopped off a few seconds off of that, running the 1:07:11. And of course, she won the race. And,
which we should mention, it's not easy to run a record on a day like that.
Yeah, it was
this
windy.
isn't a race where she's like in this group
Right.
for the whole time and everyone's running super fast.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, most people had a hard time running fast times.
Exactly. So the runner-up finisher, the silver place medalist, was Andrea Pomeranski, and she's from Michigan. We got to see her at the Lake Michigan Credit Union Bridge Run. She won the 10-mile there. And then Allie Kiefer, who's been on the show fairly recently, she claimed third, which is her first podium at a U.S. championship, in a time of 1:13:16. So it was a pretty great race, although Emily Sisson had to do her racing on her own. So there's like three ladies behind her who are racing and getting the advantage of having some competition. But Emily Sisson had to hang out there in the front alone.
I mean, like 6 minutes. Like she
Yeah.
had to really just drive from
yeah.
inside. She did not have any help.
Right.
And that is hard to do.
It is very hard to do. Yep. I did want to give a shout out to one of our previous podcast guests, also who was on the show, in sixth place, Joanna Stevens.
Yeah.
So she's a
Nice job,
personal
Joanna.
friend of mine as well. So top 10 finish at a U.S. championship is excellent.
Is that as opposed to an impersonal friend?
I guess.
On the men's side,
On the men's
it
side.
was victory by Leonard Career. No surprise. He wins races like this from time to time. But once again, in a tight finish.
Yeah. Are we a
as-
broken record with that? I feel like every men's race, U.S. championship that we talk about, it's a close finish.
Well, there's reason for that, and it's largely because, as many have described, on the men's side of American distance running currently, there really is no like someone or someones who are like
unbeatable,
well beyond others.
Yeah.
There simply are not people who are that much further beyond.
which is cool.
When
there's competition.
when the top tier are all racing together.
Yeah.
Certainly, depending on the mix of people you get in a race, it could be more or less. But as it is, this is a common sighting currently in U.S. men's distance racing. So a 102.35 win for Leonard Career, which is not a crazy fast time. You would definitely see faster times on a faster day. So, you could certainly wonder about that.
Right. Because Emily Sisson probably is going for she going
clearly
for the American record. So that's why she went out so hard. Yeah. Whereas these men were being tactical, I'm sure because of the wind, were trying to bundle up as much, not bundle, but huddle up. There we go. As much as they could, trading off the lead and whatnot. Now, in second place was Futsum Zinalasi in a time of 1:02.36. So he was only 1 second.
That's why it's so great.
1 second behind.
Tight finishes.
Yep.
Love it.
Yep.
We had Jacob Thompson in third, who has been chasing Futsum apparently since he was 15 years old.
That's what he wrote on his Instagram.
So he's continuing to chase him at the moment,
I guess,
which is kind of a fun story.
Right.
We always like to hear the stories.
Mm-hmm.
Next on the docket is the sound running track meet. Mm-hmm. Always good for some fast performances.
Yeah, which I do want to give a little bit of an idea of how this comes about, because they aren't paying appearance fees for these runners to come. So Jakob Ingebrigtsen came to the sound running.
Sure they didn't pay
Well,
him?
they didn't pay Jakob Ingebrigtsen because there's a whole article about this.
Ah.
So apparently Ingebrigtsen's agent knows the race director because he also used to work at Brooks in some capacity. Anyway, so there's
cool.
connections here. But he's like, hey, Jakob is going to be in the U.S. and wants to run a fast 5K. And then he ends up doing sound running. Anyway, but the reason for this is because of the timing of this event. It's really good for some of these longer distance races, as people want to get something coming off of a very a really good indoor season, like Jakob Ingebrigtsen.
They need qualifying times for the track season, and
qualifying's happened. That's a great transition. Yep. So Jakob Ingebrigtsen made his rare appearance in the U.S. the sound running 5K, and he had to actually work to win, which is incredible.
Does that surprise you?
Yeah, he won in 13:02. He won by only a second over Mohammed of Germany, who ran 13:03.
Okay, that's tight.
Yep. And third was OAC's Olympian Joe Klecker. He's a U.S. Olympian in a time of 13:04. And the event was sponsored by On Running, by the way.
Was that a PR?
It's a PR for
Joe
him.
Klecker,
yep,
nicely
Joe Klecker
done.
runs a PR. So Oliver Hoare, who was his teammate, rabbited the field, and the field was shooting for 13:10, under 13:10.
Well,
so
got that.
They absolutely did that. Yeah, crazy. So the top eight all ran under the world standard time, and a few of those familiar names to us: Nico Young and Connor Mance.
The youngsters.
Yep.
Nico Young.
Mance actually only snuck in by 0.25 seconds.
Okay,
so
well, he got it.
He got it. So eight runners ran the world standard time.
And that world standard time is 13:13.5 this year.
So the 8 seems to be the magic number, because on the women's side, that was the same amount of women who clocked their world standard times. The standard for the women's 15:10, and leading the way, we told you we would keep you in the loop about her. Natasha Rogers won the event, running a near PR finish time in 15:05.22. Very fast time, great competition. And then fairly new to this scene-ish is 26-year-old, at least in this event, 26-year-old Tyron Rawlings, who claimed runner-up in a personal best time of 15:05. Yep.
That's fast stuff.
Yeah.
Some good fast times in the 800 meters as well.
Allie Wilson ran a PR in 1:58. She actually fell across the finish line. Ooh. This is a world-leading time. And then second place was a PR for Nia Akins. And on the men's side, there wasn't any world standard. So we're moving on to the 1500.
And the men were slow, so let's keep going.
No, they weren't.
Women's 1500.
It just is. These are really aggressive standards. So there was three women who claimed the world standard. Excellent. Gabriella Dupuis Stafford, she won in a time of 4:03.
Of Canada.
Little note about her for those of you who follow her running career, which you should, because she has some really phenomenal records. She even has North American record in the 3,000 meter in the indoor track that she did this past winter. She left Bowerman Track Club, but she's still sponsored by Nike. Sinclair Johnson was really close to Dupuis Stafford, just on her heels in 4:03.33, so 0.13 seconds. And then Katie Snowden in 4:03.
9. Okay,
well.
yeah, wow.
Yep.
So 3
All
of
within
them
a
in
second.
All right, and the slow men in the 1500 again. We'll skip
They're
them.
not slow,
Oh,
Zach.
sorry.
There's no world times.
I thought
So
your comment right here says the men were slow. Oh, no, that's this one.
not.
All right, in the 10,000 meters.
Yes. So 3 women claimed the world standard time in the 10,000. And then rising star Wayne Kalotti, we talk about her.
I mean, she's
quite
not
a
really
bit.
rising. She's just a
She
star.
is a star. She is a star. But she's so, she's young to me. She seems young.
Because she just graduated college last year.
She ran 31:11.11. And Sharon Lokidi, she ran 31:14, and this is 4th place in a new PB. She ran 4th place in a new PB at the New York half. I put that as a little side note, so you can see that she's like getting faster in every distance, which is really exciting. We like to see that, like someone in a variety of distances getting faster and faster. And then Rose Davies ran 31:18.
It's just it's so fast. How often do you see? Well, we didn't used to, but we do now. People are just running so fast. It's awesome. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the last event of the night, the men's 10,000 meter, actually has something worth talking about.
Taking the cake for the world qualifiers.
Good. Okay, so 10 men in the field under the world standard of 28:20, which, when you get the right mix of people in there, you can see a race like this. It's not too surprising that this happens from time to time, especially at Sound Running. So we got Zuhair Talib. Oh, this is just so exciting to talk about.
I know, because I have been following him for quite a while, and he actually follows us on Instagram as well, so we've gotten a chance to go back and forth a little bit. But I loved his reflections because it kind of gives you an idea that these are real people too, even though they're running superhuman times. He said, honestly, 10,000 meters can get tough when you're not feeling good. At around 3K into the race, I felt my legs tighten up as my body ceased to respond. At around 7K, I almost dropped out. I had to verbally tell myself to keep going because the race became so difficult.
I wonder if anyone caught that on a mic. That would be really cool.
There are many reasons that this could have happened. As a full-time college student, I've had to work nonstop this past week preparing for my finals, exams, and projects. This impacted my recovery time and therefore how I felt during the race. I also had expectations about the pace and the way the race would go. And even though I still came out with a win, there's a lot to learn from this experience. And there's a lot that I will adjust for my upcoming race on May 28 at the Pre-Classic 5000. Until then, it's back to training and just taking it one day at a time.
That's great. I love it. Yeah, and Zuhair Talbi runs for an NAIA school, which is like the small school division in college athletics. Is one of those other things that's always really interesting to us because
he's at the Olympics too.
You don't see usually, almost never, you see athletes of this caliber in that collegiate division, which is kind of it's kind
cool.
of fun.
Yeah, he runs from Morocco, I believe, right?
Yes, he's Moroccan.
So I won't list all the amazing performances because there were 10 of them, but I do want to highlight Zach Panning of Michigan. He runs with the Brooks team out there, and previous podcast guest Sam Chalenga was 4th.
Okay.
So he ran a really solid time in the 10,000
times.
Yes.
All right, and finally on our list, number 3 is some unfortunate news, which is that there are some Diamond League meets. Diamond League, remember, is the track circuit where all the pros compete over the course of the summer. Well, actually, it's like now it's half the year. It's not just summer anymore. Well, okay, summer in the United States. Which for the Australian. Okay. So there are 2 meets that are usually held in China.
Well, one of them's new.
One of them is new.
It hasn't actually happened yet.
Yes.
Because it was canceled last year, too.
It was canceled last year, too. Thank you. I was like, this wasn't the first year they were going to hold it, though.
No.
Yes. So
canceled.
Naturally, China's COVID scenario is
zero policy.
COVID crazy. And so they are not really doing anything. And that makes sense. But at the same time, it's a bummer for the athletes because there are lots of monies available to them in these meets. And it's like the only way for track runners to make substantial income in terms of racing. And so they're looking for opportunities to have substitute events and such as well.
So there is a substitute event in Poland happening on August 6th in place of one of these events.
Okay.
So that will be interesting in Poland. And
thinking about upcoming.
Right, exactly. So the world of running is heating up. I guess it's always heating up because there's all different events happening at all different times of year. But talking about track coming up, the 2022 Toyota USATF Outdoor Championships will be June 23 through 26th at the University of Oregon's Hayward Field, which is going to be a preview of what we'll see at the World Athletics Outdoor Championships that will be in the U.S. for the first time at Hayward Field
But I got to say,
in July.
holding the World Championships in the middle of July in Oregon is going to, well, some will find that to be an unpleasant experience. So we'll see.
But the Hayward Field has been newly redesigned, as many of you guys have heard.
So cool.
And I did want to mention that U.S. Championship because that is where the athletes will qualify for Team USA for the World Championships that will happen July 15 through 24 this year. So lots of exciting track coming up. These athletes are wanting to be in peak performance really soon. That's a month and a half away for the U.S. Outdoor Championships. So.
By the way, bonus couple highlights. We forgot to mention a few accomplishments by some that have been known to the podcast.
Yes.
Shawana White won the Flying Pig 10K in Cincinnati. Well done. Very impressive.
And then Todd Buckingham, you'll know him as Dr. Todd. He's the one who brings us lots of science-y episodes. He was the age group national champion in 3 of his events and overall winner of the National Draft Legal Sprint Duathlon.
How many of those events happen on the same day?
This is not a question for me. This is a question for Todd. But
like
he won. It's all on the
weekend.
same weekend.
Yeah.
So Todd, he did 3 events.
He does that.
And he was
sometimes.
age group winner of all of those, plus overall winner in one of those. So
yeah, cool.
Congrats to Dr. Speedy Todd.
Well done, Todd Buckingham, PhD.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, by the way, there's always going to be more.
Yeah.
So make sure you're following in the places where the content is shared, like the social medias. Andy does a great job with getting you interesting little tidbits of content that we don't publish anywhere else. So follow her there. Or us, I guess. I don't really know anything about it, but
it's us.
Yeah. Also, we're on YouTube if you like to watch things that you could just as easily listen to, but it's a great place to consume content and interact. And that's the key piece here is wherever you're finding the information, share thoughts with us, comments and questions and things like that, because that's how we know that someone's actually listening. The stuff can tell us that a number listened, but how would we know?
Yeah. And we like it when people will send us things from the world of running that they find interesting, like Ben and Aaron have sent us some stuff. So if there's something in the world of running you want us to see, feel free to tag us so that we can know what's going on in the world of running to deliver the most interesting stuff that's going on. Because of course, we are the A to Z running community. We want to have information about the world of running, inspiration to fuel passion and excellence, and ideas for connecting with community, all while thriving as a runner. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you next week.